Hi, my name is Megan Jones, and I teach special education learning behavior disorder at an alternative high school in Lexington, Kentucky. The school accepts a variety of students who have extra behavioral and academic learning needs within grades range of 8 through 12. I currently teach 9th through 12th grade students in resource English, life skills for managing emotions, and extracurricular classes of film, photography, and fashion. I am researching an empathy intervention strategy for at-risk students in an alternative school setting. This topic interested me because the emotional behavioral problems that I see often at my school environment. In my 4 years of teaching at this school, I have noticed that students have responded better to me when I take the time to figure out what is the real issue behind the behavior before I respond negatively to the issue at hand. So overall, it seems that at-risk students have oftentimes been misunderstood in the regular education setting and have been on the path to failing and falling through the cracks and dropping out of school over time. I intend, through this empathy-based intervention strategy, to determine whether emotional coaching will help at-risk students and behavioral students have significantly less behavior problems in the classroom to enhance educational success. My first question in this study is to ask, what is the impact of using empathy-based intervention strategies in the classroom to reduce recidivism or repeat behaviors of negative student behaviors in an alternative school setting? My hypothesis is that an empathy-based strategy will correlate with a reduction in negative student behaviors more than a teacher who would use a traditional behavioral management strategy. In reviewing literature, which goes along with my topic, I found that students who drop out in an at-risk setting create a large economic impact. It can cost an individual student as much as $260,000 for dropping out personally, and it can cost the overall economy more than $192 million a year. Not only that, but crime is highly related to the dropout rate in an area. Students who are diagnosed with an EBD, or emotional behavior disorder, are most likely to be at risk more than their peers, and 46% of students have significant risk factors. Students' environments also play a large role on their emotional development. If a student lacks a supportive and structured family environment, the student is more likely to exhibit emotional and behavioral problems. Also, frustration is a common characteristic of students who have such home lives, and frustration can be a precursor to aggression and other unacceptable behaviors. As mentioned before, students labeled with an emotional behavior disorder usually struggle to process social information, respond to stress in an inappropriate manner, and they also have an inability to not see things very well from another person's perspective. Students who lack these abilities generally show better responses in low stress and non-frustrating situations. If empathy is not used to eliminate behavior problems, then the frustration is likely to grow. Alternative schools are one of two major program initiatives that respond to the dropout dilemma because they do different things than a traditional system would do. Alternative schools focus on changing behavior through academic and therapeutic methods. There have been a few research ways to help decrease problem behaviors, which include holistic approaches to teaching, alternative schools, teaching social skills to students, teaching others to think of others through empathy, mentor relationships, and modeling empathy in the classroom. With the research showing that students in an at-risk environment struggle to handle frustrating situations correctly, it is seen that a holistic environment may help these students learn more empathy skills. Because of this, I began planning my emotional empathy coaching intervention strategies. Overall, for my subjects, I have students who consist of secondary range from 9th to 12th grade, specifically in the classrooms that I am working with, even though the whole school goes from 8th to 12th grade. This school, once again, is called the Learning Center in Lexington, Kentucky, and we have about 157 students who attend the school, and 62% of these students qualify for free and reduced lunch, and 29% of these students qualify in the range of special education. These students have a wide range of ethnic backgrounds, such as 71% Caucasian and 18% African American, along with 5% Hispanic and 6% of other ethnic backgrounds. For my study, my methodology includes there will be a non-randomized two-group study to see how effective the emotional coaching intervention strategy really is in the classroom. Two teachers in the one group will implement the emotional coaching strategy based intervention and will collect data based on behavioral incidents that occur. Two other teachers will use a traditional behavior management strategy and will collect data on the number of behavioral incidents that occur in their room. Typical class sizes vary from 8 to 20 students, depending on the classroom and the situation. Baseline data will be the number of offenses and misbehaviors that occur in the classroom. The employability system will be used to collect the number of incidents and repeat behaviors that occur in both the intervention and control rooms. Now, just to clarify what the employability system is, the Learning Center uses a behavior management strategy, actually a behavior data recording strategy, that looks at the different tasks, such as if students are on task in behavior, if they're on time, if they use appropriate language, if they use appropriate electronics, if they're ready to work, and if they're on task. Teachers are required for each class period to record whether each individual student meets these 6 requirements in each period. If the students do not meet these 6 requirements, they are considered disruptive in the classroom and not complying with school regulation and teacher regulation. And for this reason, I could use the employability system in order to collect my data because it is consistently recorded. It is also set on specific terms that I wanted to use in my study. And as I mentioned before, these areas, as you could probably see in this one slide, where the school's poster is set up where it's specifically defined as on time, is that the teacher and the student will check in with the teacher before the end of the transition bell. For a student to be on task, they must consistently do what the teacher asks them to do. For a student to be a team player, they must be willing to work with anyone in order to get the job done. And in order to have respectful language points, they have to speak in a way that is appropriate and professional and without cussing. Students who are using electronics appropriately will use them for academic uses only and will not have them out for any other reason. Students who are ready to work will come prepared in dress, supply, and in attitude. And once again, as I said before, if these areas are not met, the student is considered disruptive or non-compliant in the classroom, and therefore their points will be taken from them if they are not complying in these areas. So in order to test my hypothesis, my dependent variable will be the number of subsequent problem behaviors in the classroom, these problem behaviors that align with the employability system. Each time a student violates one of the 6 employability skills as defined by the school, the student will be marked for the negative behavior. The independent variable is the treatment applied to the student through the emotional coaching intervention strategy. The intervention strategy will be used by 2 separate teachers in 2 separate classrooms in the group, and then there will be a second group who is the control group who does not use the strategy at all. But just as a side note, the control group will still record their students through the employability system for data purposes. After conducting the experiment and collecting data, I compared the results to my initial hypothesis. I initially asked the question that if a empathy-based behavior problem intervention strategy is used in a classroom, will it reduce the negative student behavior more than a traditional classroom with traditional behavior management strategies that are used? In my study, I found first of all that the non-intervention classrooms declined in almost every area in positive behavior percentages overall. As seen in this graph here, you can see that Classroom A and Classroom B both decreased in behavior over time, as seen as the second half of the intervention period. Once again, classrooms A and B did not use the intervention, but they had the same time period as both groups. Also, the data showed that the teachers in classrooms A and B without the intervention increased in overall specific at-risk behaviors in the classroom. As seen in these charts here, areas in red indicate that the student has been non-compliant with behavior more than 50% of the time. So I indicate that as an at-risk behavior in the classroom. So as you can see in classroom A and in classroom B, both of their behaviors increased in the negative sense, and they both had more significant problems without the intervention throughout this period of time. In the intervention classrooms, I found that the emotional intervention strategy did support the hypothesis in a way that the strategy would help reduce negative student behaviors more than the traditional methods did. However, the results did not show a large enough difference in overall percentages to make a large impact statement for my hypothesis. For example, Classroom C saw slight decreases in overall percentage of positive behavior, but they had the least amount of at-risk behaviors levels in the group study. So their students did well on an individual basis, but in overall averages, they slightly decreased over time. However, Classroom D saw an increase in mostly all overall averages, and they experienced progress, even though that teacher's score started off significantly lower than the others. He used the intervention strategies, and this classroom increased in their overall averages and saw a decrease in at-risk student behaviors. As you can see in this chart here, that the red areas, the less than 50% positive behavior, that these red areas decreased for these specific students. So it is seen that classroom C and D had better overall tendencies and scores. However, as you can see, the percentages are not all that different from each other, in the range of about 62% to about 92%. Classroom C started off with the highest levels of empathy before the study, trying to look at the implications of what is going on here. So Classroom C started off with the highest levels of empathy as an educator in the study. So this teacher had more indications, as I observed the process, that he necessarily did not use as many of the reflection sheets in the intervention as were given, and did not use as many and as often as Classroom D did. However, because he uses the strategies ingrained in his classroom policies and behaviors, as he's naturally more geared towards this mindset, he did see less overall at-risk behaviors than any other teacher in the study. The Classroom D had more of a traditional mindset in teaching strategies and started off significantly low in the beginning of the study. As you can see, this group was one of the only groups to increase in student behavior overall averages, and also found a way to decrease the at-risk behaviors that students found. So overall, this one had the greatest improvement of all four groups. In the near future, for my further implications and thoughts for later, I would like to pursue this topic further in a doctoral study that I'm attempting to pursue in the next year, and would like to use this study as my foundation. And some of the things that I've learned, if I were to do this study again, I would like to focus on a narrower range of behaviors. As I chose 6 main behaviors in the classroom, I would like to narrow the groups down to a smaller amount, and also the types of behaviors I look at down to a smaller amount. I would also like to conduct further study in comparing the alternative education setting to a traditional education setting, as possibly a thought that came through this process is that my score percentage ranges from 62 to 92% weren't all different from each other, potentially because of the environment that the school is already alternative and already using a holistic mindset overall. But I would like to one day conduct a further investigation in seeing whether a traditional setting is much different than an alternative, and seeing if somebody uses this intervention behavior empathy strategy in a traditional public school, how that will differ from somebody who does not use the intervention. So overall, I have seen um, different impacts, and I do feel like my hypothesis did find some variation of approval, and just the fact that I do believe it was confirmed. But once again, because of different reasons, the percentages were not all that different from each other. So I do hope to pursue this topic further in later studies. Thank you.